Hello, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, I have a new friend with me, and Linda, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and what you love about what you do?
Sure. And thank you so much for inviting me to
Oh,
chat with you
of
today. My name
course.
is Linda Hershman. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in practice for almost 30 years now. I also have a group practice called the Couples and Family Wellness Center. And I am the author of a book called Gray Divorce, Everything You Need to Know About Later Life Breakups. And what I love about what I do is watching people become empowered.
That is a big statement and hard to do. Like I know it's a lot of work to empower people or have them empower themselves. It sounds like a beautiful career.
It's been a wonderful career.
Mhm. And then working with people going through divorce. I mean, I know your book, Great Divorce, is actually such a great topic because there are, a big section of divorce is in what we call the gray divorce, and that's usually your more mature divorce or divorcees, where they waited for the kids to leave the house, and then they finally said, "Okay, well now we're going to do what we want to do." And so there's a lot of different parameters that are different for somebody retiring or divorcing at that stage versus somebody who's divorcing at an earlier stage in the marriage. So do you have any, conversation pieces that, you think are important for people going through a great divorce that may help our audience?
Absolutely. And the first thing I would like to do is define gray divorce. Divorce refers specifically to divorcing over age 50.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not a term I created. If you Google it, you will see something like 900,000 references to it online. And there are two fun facts that I want to throw out about gray divorce. One is that 1 in 4 couples over age 50 are divorcing, and the statistics increase with each subsequent marriage. And the second fun fact is 2/3 of gray divorces, actually 66%, are initiated by women.
Wow. Wow. That's a
Yeah,
big statistic.
it is a big statistic. And in terms of what people should know, first of all, I think people are really curious about the reasons why this is happening, especially since in 1990, 1 out of 10 couples over age 50 got divorced. And the biggest reason that women are initiating is because we can.
Hmm.
Because if you look back, even until 1976, women had very little economic power. They generally did not have career positions. Until the mid 1970s, they could not get credit cards in their own name. Even when they were the primary breadwinners, they couldn't get mortgages in their own names. They had to have a man sign
Ugh,
off on all of these things. And we think of that as the dark ages, but
it's not that long ago.
it's
It is
not that
not
long
that
ago.
long ago.
It's not that long ago. I remember it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so women no longer have to stay in marriages that aren't working for them, whether for overt or covert reasons, whether it's addiction, abuse, adultery, all the common kinds of things, or whether people have just outgrown each other, which
That's
brings me to the number 2 point, that when my grandparents were growing older, the life expectancy was much shorter. And the expectation was you would retire at age 60 or 65. You get gold watch. If you were lucky, you had another 5, 6 years. And that was it. Now, when people retire at 65, oftentimes they can have 20, 25, even 30 more healthy, productive, vital years. And they may have grown in very different directions from their partners. And so sometimes it's just a function of, we put in 30, 40 years and we've just grown apart at this point.
Yeah.
And then another big reason for the increase in gray divorce is because of no fault divorce. Again, when I was growing up and really into about 1990, divorces were fault divorces. There were 7 grounds that, and you had to prove one of the grounds in order to be granted a divorce. And I never remember all 7, but ones I remember are adultery, addiction, abuse, non-consummation, abandonment, imprisonment, and then there are 2 more that I just don't remember, but you get the idea. And it used to be, if you wanted a divorce, even if both partners wanted the divorce and they wanted it to be amicable, somebody had to be the at-fault person. Somebody had to go to court and say, this is this terrible thing that my partner did to me. Right. And it was a nightmare for everybody involved, especially children.
Yeah.
And since 1990, all 50 states have implemented no-fault divorce, and some states require a no-fault divorce. And I won't get into the legal aspects because I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on Zoom. But as you know, I hang out with a lot of family law attorneys.
Yeah.
And then the other big reason for the rise is the destigmatization. When I was growing up, I could count on one hand my friends whose parents were not together. And it was, in a lot of cases, the secret thing. Nobody talked about it.
Right.
And of course, now it's just as common for families to not be your traditional mom, dad, 2.5 kids as it is for a family to look like that.
Yeah. And it is, it's not as much of a stigmatism or stigma. I forget the proper word for it, but there are still problems that people face who are divorced. I think especially women, that they tell me, they're looked at differently. They're not invited to certain things. I've heard some crazy stories about it, but it is much better than it used to be.
It is. And to your point, Regina, there are still a lot of fears and a lot of issues that people have when they are divorcing over 50. And for both men and women, one of the 2 biggest fears is financial.
Oh, yeah.
Will it be okay financially? How will that impact me? And for women, there's a big fear of who will take care of me. Am I going to end up alone? For older men, the fear is more what will happen to my relationship with my adult children. And there's good reason for that. Men's relationships with their adult children tend to suffer much more than women's do when they get divorced.
Yeah, I have seen that for sure. And it is a challenge. I mean, going through divorce at any age is a challenge, but it is, especially the financial side of it, it can be rather difficult because, you've now saved all this money for your retirement. You have this vision of your retirement as a couple, and now you have 2 separate boats, 2 separate people, and two separate, visions of the retirement, and how are you going to be able to fund it now that you're so, either so close or right on top of retirement. Do you have enough time to recover? And then recovering from a divorce financially tends to be a conversation that we have with people going through divorce who are considered that great divorce.
Right. And one of the things I talk about in the book is the extra impact it has on underserved populations and people of color, because they have less wealth to begin with, less
Mm-hmm.
accrued wealth and inherited wealth to begin with. And so you're splitting a lot less if there's anything to split.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does make it a difficult conversation around planning for retirement when there isn't much of a pot to split to begin with. And especially if, in some of these cases, the women have been home taking care of the children, and they don't have their own nest egg, or didn't have the portion of the pie is mostly not something that they've brought into the relationship, or they weren't working and now they have to decide, can I work? I mean, do I have to work? And then, can I work? Because they've been maybe out
Mm-hmm.
of the workforce for so many years, and they had great jobs, but now they have to go back maybe into the workforce at a much lower level, and have to rebuild that whole structure all over again.
Right. And what kind of work do you start doing at that point? And I'm sure you've seen a lot of this during the pandemic. A lot of people over age 50 lost their jobs, their companies closed down, and they have never been able to go back to work.
Yeah, yeah, that did happen. And actually, most of the people who left were women. They're calling it a she session because so many women left the workforce because of COVID, because they were at home with their families, and they were also trying to educate their kids because their kids were home, and something had to give, and it was their job. So a lot of women left the workforce at that stage as well.
Right. And I saw that a lot with my clients. And I had a window directly into their living rooms because
Yeah.
we were doing everything virtually then. And I'm so grateful we were able to do that. And I could offer whatever kind of support I was able. And the younger women, I think it may have been easier for them to get back into the workforce and get back to their jobs if they chose to do so. But when you're 60 years old and you're out of work for 2 or 3 years,
A lot harder.
nobody's looking for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's, and that goes down to, I guess that goes to the workplace discrimination. Well, although they're not supposed to, they
Right.
do. Um, yeah, that is another problem. Absolutely. Absolutely. And how do you solve for that? And then you have, like, right now, on top of that, you have the housing issues. You have a house that, even if you can afford to stay in, you have to refinance it, and the mortgage rate might be at 3%. Now you have to refinance it at 7. So your
Mm-hmm.
payment, goes from this to that, where you're paying so much more. And then, is it affordable? But then, if you can't afford to stay in the house, can you find somewhere to rent, and how much is that going to be? So it's like an evolving problem that just keeps growing and growing. And working with people like you, and people like me, and divorce coaches, helping them through those conversations, just having a sounding board for all those items that they have to process during a divorce, um, can be helpful to have people to be there to guide them.
Absolutely. And there's one thing I want to add to it, which nobody talks about, and that is the impact on adult children when their parents divorce.
Very true.
There is the assumption that, well, they're adults, they have their own lives, they have their own families, and they'll understand and they'll be fine. And in a lot of ways, it's actually harder for adult children when their parents divorce
Mhm.
for both economic and emotional reasons. Economically, when parents divorce, and we're talking about splitting this pot, there are things that their parents might have promised them: will pay for college, will pay for grad school, will pay for your wedding, and suddenly the money is being divided and the parents are worrying about their own survival. And
Right.
so these ACODs, as they're called, adult children of divorce, are looking at financial issues that they might not have anticipated. Oftentimes there's the loss of childcare. Again, when your parents were retired and they were coming over and watching the kids once or twice a week, or even every day, it was oftentimes a really good situation for everybody. But now maybe one of your parents moves away after the divorce, or one of your parents has to go back to work and you lose your childcare.
Right.
There is the loss of holiday traditions and rituals and things like that that we all get so invested in. But there are also a lot of loyalty issues because they're adults. Parents tend to overshare and
Yeah.
treat them like their friend. And it puts the adult children in a terrible position of feeling like they have to be loyal toward one parent or another.
Very true.
And so I always remind my older adult divorcing parents that even though they might look like middle-aged people, they're still your children. They're not your girlfriend.
Right. That's great. That's great advice. That's great advice. Great. And there are, I do know a parenting coach that does help with those conversations. And she's fabulous. And she also talks about how people ignore the adult children and they are hurting just as badly as the younger kids. And but they're ignored because they're adults and nobody even acknowledges their pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
another fun fact for, okay, pop quiz for you. What do you think is the worst time for parents to divorce? I
Oh,
won't put
well,
you on the
it's
spot.
never easy, but I guess the holidays would have to be the hardest time.
The worst time for parents to decide to divorce is when their child is getting ready to go to college or in their first year.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, their world's disrupted completely. And I will tell you, there's a lot of parents, a lot of people, that's when they decide they've like been holding on, holding on, holding on.
Mm-hmm.
Once my kid gets to college, I can then be free. And yeah, it does have a very big impact on the kids.
Absolutely. And well, first of all, when you're waiting until your kids go to college, you are putting an incredible sense of guilt and responsibility on them when they start to think, oh, my parents only stayed together because of me. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a really rough thing to do to even an adult child. But beyond that, college is such a time of transition. It's a time when kids are, and I use the word kids
Yeah, yeah.
loosely. I know legally they're adults, but
Except
when
when the tuition bills due, then
yeah,
then the tuitions
right,
acknowledge that they have parents.
exactly. But they are trying to individuate. They're trying to find out who they are. They may be away from home for the first time. And when their parents are divorcing, they can't, they have one foot in each world. They can't fully move into their own lives because they're worried what's happening at home. Are my parents okay? Are my younger sisters and brothers okay? Where am I going to stay when I come home over spring break? And yet they can't.
Yeah,
So they have one foot in both worlds.
for sure, for sure. So if people wanted to reach out to you for help with these conversations, how would they find you?
Well, the best thing is to go to my website, lindahershman.com, and that's LANDAHERSHMAN.com, no I, no C. And you'll get information about where I'm presenting, and you can get information on my book. And whenever I'm doing podcast or talks, I run a promo on the print copy of the book if somebody is interested in that. And it will have all my contact information. It will have links to my social media.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Yeah, because I know there's always somebody who's listening and who says, "Oh, that's me. I need to talk to her." So it's a good way for you, for them to reach out to you. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I would say, even if for whatever reason it is not pragmatic for you to talk to me, the book offers solutions for the emotional, legal, financial, parenting issues of divorcing in later life.
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of information in there. That's for sure. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. And I'm going to say our call to action is, if you're facing this conversation in your own world, go visit Linda's website and definitely take a look at her book because there's some, helpful hints in there that could, at least educate you about what you're about to embark upon on. And sometimes knowledge is power, and it could help your transition through this. It is a very difficult transition, no matter how old or how young you are. It's divorce is still a tough topic. It's a tough life event. But we want to make sure that you have people surrounding you that can help you through it. Thank you so much for joining us, Linda. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Regina. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And again, I am Regina McCann Hess. My website is forgewealth.com. You can follow me on my social media, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Forge Wealth, and on LinkedIn, Regina McCann Hess. Have a great day. Thanks.